guys, it's Emma and I'm back today for you with another video, and today I am reviewing a book, okay? This book is a book that I've been waiting with bated breath, chomping at the bit, one might say, all right, to get my hands on. Literally my most anticipated read of the entire year, and that book is The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a Western horror historical novel following the events of the life of this Blackfeet vampire named Goodstab, who haunts the Blackfeet reservation looking for justice. And we find out what his story is through these journal entries that are written in 1912. These journal entries include interviews with Goodstab, and these interviews slowly unveil a forgotten chain of events that lead to over 200 Blackfeet dead in the snow. Now, for this book, we have quite a few content warnings, all right, because, y'all, this book is a lot. So, for content warnings, we have animal death and mutilation, and it's quite a lot, so if that's gonna bother you, I probably wouldn't pick this up. Human, including child death and mutilation, rape, mentions of sexual assault, murder, suicidal ideation, mentions of alcoholism, and then mentions of mass murder. Look, Stephen Graham Jones is one of my favorite authors. He does horror, in my opinion, in such a unique way. As soon as I heard about, oh yeah, no, it's Goodstab being interviewed by a priest and him writing it down, I immediately thought Interview with the Vampire.
Have you heard enough?
But it was
I've had to listen to that for centuries.
This video is going to be me spoiler-free reviewing The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones, all right? So before we actually get started, I would really appreciate it if you guys would look down in the description box for all the links there that I have for you guys pertaining to stuff going on in the world right now. And those links will be down there for you guys to interact with and to share. And then down in the comment section, let me know whether or not you guys have read this book, whether you liked it, whether you didn't like it, whether you agreed or disagreed with anything I have to say about this book. Whether you like Stephen Graham Jones. I've read The Only Good Indians, Leadfeather, Mongrels, and now The Buffalo Hunter. If you have any more Stephen Graham Jones books that you particularly like, please recommend them to me and tell me why I should read them, because I love this dude's books. So, with that being said, let's just get running into it. All right, pro number one, the writing style. All right, it is the very unique and signature Stephen Graham Jones writing style. I've said this with The Only Good Indians before. The writing style is very reminiscent of how somebody naturally thinks and talks. So very long sentences diced up with a lot of commas. And maybe it's because I'm reading this book now, but the writing style in here and just his writing style in general honestly reminds me of Notes from a Dead House by Fyodor Dostoevsky. All right, again, very long sentences cut up by a lot of commas. The only difference between Stephen Graham Jones' writing style and Fyodor Dostoevsky's writing style, at least that I've gathered so far, is that Dostoevsky goes on more tangents.
You'll never eat, you'll never sleep, you will never stop.
Meanwhile, the Buffalo Hunter's writing is very choppy, but it's continuously like that. So it's consistent and you get used to it. And again, it's just very reminiscent of somebody who's naturally thinking and naturally talking. In my opinion, the writing style of this book really helps the overall tone of the book. My second pro, the pacing. The Buffalo Hunter's pacing goes from fast to really slow, to really fast, to really slow, to really fast, to really slow, and etc. Normally, I would think that this type of pacing is very jarring and not in a good way. However, I think because this book has this pacing paired with this unique writing style, I think it works. I think it overall aids the tone of the story. I think the slow parts are what really saved me from thinking that the pacing was jarring in a bad way, okay? Because yes, we go from fast to slow and then back to fast and then back to slow in very abrupt ways, but the slow parts feel natural. There are obviously going to be natural slow parts in a story. And when we get to these slow parts, we're dealt some very serious, very dense information, very dense topics, anything of the sort. And so these slow parts, like I said, they feel natural. They don't feel forced. They don't feel out of place. And that really helped the book overall from not feeling like a slog. This whole book, because of this pacing and how well it's done, is kept interesting and intriguing and you're not left bored by anything. So, I think that the writing style and the pacing really help the overall tone of the book, and the slow parts really help the structure of the book to keep it natural and flowing and interesting, all right? Which I think is pretty difficult to do, to keep a slow bit of a story that is as action-packed and bloody and terrifying as this is, to make the slow parts of this type of story still be as interesting. The third pro are the horror elements, all right? Listen, I am gonna tell y'all right here and right now, this book is very graphic. It is very violent. This book recounts the brutalization of the West in the 1800s on its inhabitants, both human and animal. It's also a brutal revenge story. Just the revenge aspect adds such a huge amount of tension to it, especially to the historical aspect. This is a vampire book. Okay, so the vampire lore and the mechanics of this book are so original, and they make these vampires scary, all right? You genuinely feel helpless against these vampires due to just the shit that they can do. Also, the Buffalo Hunter is a Western horror.
She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment.
Literally one of the main reasons why I picked it up, all right? I love a good Western horror, lone women, little heaven, right up my alley, okay? So you're not only scared of the antagonists, right, or the monsters in this supernatural story, but you're also terrified of the wilderness, of the elements. In a Western horror, the wilderness, the flora and the fauna, the elements themselves are just as scary and just as dangerous. This is also found footage, which I gotta say, one of, if not my favorite subgenre of horror. You're able to learn about different characters this way, and because there are multiple points of views, you see different sides of characters based on these points. Is that a fucking Cybertruck?
Oh, honey. Girl, okay. Security.
Oh my gosh, they've reached me. Moment of silence. Anyway, what the hell was I saying? Through found footage, you learn about different characters this way, and because there are multiple points of views, you learn about the different sides of characters through these different points of views, all right? Which introduces the whole idea of unreliable narrators. Can we trust what anybody really says? This book's horror elements aren't just bloody and terrifying, but they're also just strange at times. There were quite a few times with the Buffalo Hunter where my jaw just dropped and stayed dropped. Pro number 4 of the Buffalo Hunter is the historical aspects. This is a historical novel centered around the Marius Massacre of 1870, which was a massacre of Blackfeet Native Americans by the US Army. And this book covers events leading up to said massacre, the massacre's after effects, events after the massacre, anything such taking place between 1830s and the 1890s. The historical aspects in here are what make this book dense, all right? I'm not gonna sit here and lie to y'all. The Buffalo Hunter is a very dense book. It is talking about a lot of really heavy topics, a lot of historical figures, a lot of historical events, all at one time, all right? But that's what it's supposed to do. You know what I mean? Just like how a slow book does not automatically equal a bad book, a dense book does not automatically equal a boring or a bad book. You know what I mean? I really do think the denseness of this story truly holds the impact of this story. And then the 5th pro that I have for this beauty of a book is just the mixture of emotions, all right? It makes you weirded out, it makes you sad, and it makes you scared, all right? Being sad and scared, mixing those two emotions in any medium, I feel is pretty hard to do. In a movie or TV show, you can see it, but in a book, it's a little bit harder to do that because it's written out all the way, you know what I mean? But I feel like the Buffalo Hunter mixes those two emotions very, very well. Especially when you look at the fact that there is so much tragic irony throughout Goodstab's past, all right? It honestly reminded me, where is it? A lot of The Only Good Indians, all right? The characters in here, what they go through reminds me a lot of Goodstab. And particularly with mixing sad and scary, this book does a very, very good job at stacking up events one after the other, after the other, after the other, whether they be tragic, whether they be scary, to where you read something that feels so much smaller than everything else, but that's the thing that sets you off, because that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
I have had enough.
This book is very efficient at making things that normally feel so insignificant feel incredibly significant. Leading off of that, okay, this book is very good at stacking tragedy after scare after scare after tragedy after scare, etc., and then you're expecting something either tragic or scary, and you're hit with something completely different. It's just bizarre, this thing that you're hit with, right? Which just confuses you and sets you even more on edge, which can't lie, all right, left feeling very on edge. As much as I am praising the Buffalo Hunter, we do have two cons to talk about, all right? And the first one is just that the events in this book get a little bit too outrageous. It reminds me of this fantasy story that I read where it also pushed the bounds of believability, even in a fantasy setting, okay? Because it was this fantasy world where they were in deserts and jungles, very hot climates. And then all of a sudden, a magical creature was introduced, and it's Sully from Monsters, Inc. blue and shaggy haired. I'm like, okay, wait, what? It gets to a point where, like, yeah, no, I was already suspending my beliefs because it's vampires. Towards the end of this book, the events start to take a more extravagant turn than what would be more believable even in a supernatural setting, if that makes sense. And then the second con, all right? And this one to me is honestly the more disappointing one, because believability, you know what? I can suspend my beliefs all damn day. But the second con that I have with the Buffalo Hunter is that the end is a little bit meandering, okay? Now let me explain. In my opinion, there is a difference between slow and meandering. Slow reads to me originally as the naturally slow part in a story, where the story naturally slows down in order to do this or that, right? Whereas meandering means you're taking too much time to do something, which makes it boring, all right? Slow can be boring, but it doesn't always mean boring, all right? A slow book, like I said earlier, does not automatically equal a boring or a bad book. However, meandering means you're not doing it in a quick enough time, which means it's turning into a slog to read, which means it's boring. All right, and unfortunately, and I hate to say this, oh gosh, I hate to say this so bad.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, Your Airness.
Unfortunately, the Buffalo Hunter, maybe like the last 40 pages, you could have cut them out. Or at least slim them down. These slow parts, like I was talking about with the pacing, were still intriguing to read. They were as intriguing to read as the fast parts, as the action-packed parts. But the end felt so drawn out. I don't need to know how she gets from Wyoming to Montana. I don't need to know how many gas stations she stopped at. I don't need to know how she got down from her balcony into her car. All I need to know now at the ending point of this story is that she gets from point A to point B, and that's it. Or at least that's me, you know what I mean? I can see how this would be kind of, you know, picking too many things apart. However, it's just something that, in my opinion, kind of bogged down the very ending for me. I gave the Buffalo Hunter 5 stars. 5 stars. Y'all heard me right. And I am not going to lie and say that I was like so happy and chipper after I was finished it. No, all right. This book put me in a mood to where I was just like numb for maybe 6 hours after I finished it. All right, this book is a lot. This book is very dense. It's talking a lot about history, and a lot about history that isn't very well known. Okay, so you're gonna be hit with a lot at once, and it is so awful, some of the shit that you read about. And then you're hit with it. This isn't just a book. This shit actually happened. You know what I mean? So I'm saying all this, I'm glad it left me numb. It was a very well-rewarded numb feeling, all right? This book hit me in all the ways that it was supposed to. This book did everything that it was supposed to. And I think it did it very well. So you guys, that was my review of the Buffalo Hunter Hunter. I hope that you enjoyed. If this seems like a book that you would like to read, I highly recommend, honestly, I recommend this book to people who like Westerns, to people who like horror, to history buffs. Y'all, this book is so multifaceted, all right? This book could work for so many people, all right? I truly don't know how else I can tell y'all to read this book other than by saying, read this book, okay? This book, it's phenomenal. This book, The Buffalo Hunter Hunter, is already one of my favorites of the whole year. I haven't been able to stop thinking about this book since I read it, and I feel like this is going to be one of those books that I will never stop thinking about.
You've charmed me.
So you guys, I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you continue to look out for more stuff on my channel. Hope that you guys are staying safe. And lastly, I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.